the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
Welcome to opening day 2023 for Major League Baseball. But let's face it, this is a football show. We're probably going to touch on baseball throughout the program tonight because it is a new dawn. It is a new age for the baseball season. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of optimism going throughout all the Better Sports Network viewers with their team. Can we get to the playoffs? Can we win a World Series? There's a lot of that. And I think hope springs eternal this time of year for a lot of NFL teams because we're in the midst of NFL draft season, people. We are less than a month away before NFL franchises are going to turn towards new signal callers to set up the next half decade or perhaps decade plus, or if they draft an alien like Tom Brady, 40, 50 years of their franchise. We're going to be talking about that on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show tonight. It's an exciting time to be a sports fan, whether it's baseball, football, what have you. We have you covered here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show tonight. I am Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship at myffpc.com. Want to welcome in my co-host for this evening. You know him well from Fantasy Pros. You follow him on Twitter at dbro_FFB. Derek Brown, welcome on to the program, man.
Balkman, what's up, man? It's been a minute since we've talked. I'm excited. It's this time of the year is always the slow simmering and the percolation of the NFL draft and the NFL, all things best ball. It's really heating up, man. So good time to talk some ball.
What do you consider yourself more like what's your guilty, well, I should say what's your guilty pleasure, but what are you more of a fan of? Do you like the redraft more than Dynasty, or has Dynasty taken over and like, oh man, I love Dynasty fantasy football?
If I'm playing redraft, it's got to be for a good bit of quiche. Outside of that, but outside of high stakes redraft, it's really a lot of DFS, a lot of Dynasty at that point. Like I've kind of gotten out of like most of the redraft scene outside of playing high stakes stuff. Just, I mean, because I'm busy in the content weeds, man. Like with Fantasy Pros and this, like, you know, I'm busy doing what I love. So it takes a little bit of time away from all the setting lineups and stuff. So not so much laziness, but a lot of my action is going towards best ball.
You know, what's funny about that is so many people I have had on podcasts over the years, they said whoever invented best ball needs to be inducted into some sort of like Mount Rushmore of life, not just fantasy football, but of life, because we get all the best parts of it, right? We get the drafting. We don't have to worry about waivers. We don't have to worry about setting lineups, and we could still win. I mean, we had Pat Corain on this show a few weeks back. He won $2 million playing best ball.
I love Corain.
And like, so it's just one of those things like where, and it's the perfect like precursor to actual drafting season. Cause there's plenty of people that will just do all draft. They will just draft all best balls all season. And then there's other people that'll be like, okay, best balls is sort of my warm up to, you know, stuff like the FFPC main event, or this year, the Fantasy Pros Championship, you know, stuff like that. So I think it's very exciting. And what's exciting about it for the FFPC, as far as that goes, is you can win $25,000 in the 2023 FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, just $125 entry fee. That's at myffpc.com. If you want to play Superflex, there is a Superflex tournament, the Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament, $35 to enter, $5,000 is the grand prize in there. Both of these tournaments are going to go all the way up until the start of the NFL draft. No kickers, no defenses, a 14-week regular season, 3 weeks of playoffs, and then a champion's crown at the end of week 17. 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks over at myffpc.com. You want to take on Dynasty? We're going to get into some Dynasty talk, and Derek's going to offer his Dynasty perspective and his thoughts and feelings, not only on current players and their Dynasty value, but rookies as well. Adopt a Dynasty team right now with the FFPC. Discounted teams are available right now from $77 to $2,500. That's not the discounted price. Those are the league entry prices right now. You can get Dynasty orphan teams for as low as $1 and manage them to Dynasty greatness. MyFFPC.com is where you can go for that. And I'll break some news here on the show. We will no longer, with the FFPC, we are not offering $77 startups anymore. We're going to shift to $100 startups, which is something we've never offered before. So the $77 ones are no more. I mean, we'll still have those leagues, but as far as startups go, $100 startups from here on out. I think It's not necessarily a thing where we're trying to raise prices. It's just more of a thing that clears up any confusion. Because I know there's some confusion about how you don't have to pay for an entire year with the 77s, but you still got to put a deposit down in the next year. We're eliminating all that. We're making it simpler to be a dynasty champion at myffpc.com. And part of the reason I'm having Derek on tonight is you can win $1 million in the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship at just $350 entry fee. Now think about that. You plunk down $350 and you can turn that into $1 million. You register by June 1st and draft by June 15th. This is our early bird promo. You'll get a free $35 league credit. If you want to do that up to 3 times, you can do it up to 3 times, and you'll get free credits for that as well. That's myffpc.com, the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship, $1 million grand prize. One of 2 contests we'll have this year with a $1 million grand prize. Shout out to Derek Brown and Bennett Carroll. Let's get into it. Bennett Carroll, by the way, the man behind the glass tonight. Lamar Jackson. My God, if this guy has not dominated conversation over the last 2 months, I don't know where you've been. Lamar Jackson, the latest we have on him, Derek. Jeremy Fowler said, I think it was it this morning? I think it was this morning, yeah. Believes that Lamar Jackson is no longer, or maybe never was, demanding a fully guaranteed contract. He just wants the guaranteed portion of his next contract to be larger than what Deshaun Watson got from Cleveland. Now, $230 million is what Watson got. And NFL team after NFL team, plenty of teams have come out and said, we're not interested. We're not interested. Now, the Colts have kind of said, well, maybe we might be interested on that, what have you. A lot of his critics bring up the 2021 and 2022 seasons where he kind of got hurt. One of the things I want to bring up here, and I think this is important to understand, because there's been a lot of people, and I don't know where you stand on this, Derek, so maybe we're going to butt heads on this right away. But a lot of the things that have been said is the NFL is colluding against Lamar Jackson, that they don't want to offer this guaranteed contract, and they have it out for him. I view it like in a different light. I view it that there was one owner willing to offer a guaranteed contract, and it was Deshaun Watson, and it was Jimmy Haslam in Cleveland. And I don't necessarily think that owners are colluding against him. I just think that they're looking at this from a business sense, like we don't want to be soaking in $230 million plus guaranteed into one player, regardless if he had the injury issues, right? I think Jimmy Haslam was the outlier, and I think that the NFL, is being wrongly lumped into like, oh, the NFL is against Lamar Jackson. I don't think the NFL is against Lamar Jackson. I think the Browns were for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I don't think the NFL is against Lamar Jackson. Now, do I want Lamar to get the bag? Of course I do. I mean, any player getting paid, more to you. Go ahead, get your money. Considering what these players go through every single year just to keep their bodies in tune and on the field and what they endure, so get your bag. But I look at this as more of like the Browns did something that the rest of the NFL was like, no, man, we don't want to do that. And so the rest of the NFL, before it becomes a thing and spreads like wildfire with a lot of, because we have a lot of really, really good quarterbacks that are going to come up and starting to get paid. You got Joe Burrow, you got Justin Herbert, just to name 2. And so other franchises are like, well, hell no, we don't want to do that. So I think a lot of this is just drawing a line in the sand and saying, look, we don't want to do this. I know the Browns did that, but we're not setting that precedent, and this is where the buck stops. So I think it's more of that than teams colluding against Lamar. Although, I'm all for, like, Lamar, get every single dime you can, dude.
And I think when it comes down to it, he's just such a talented guy. And I think it was it Fowler or Pelissero? I can't remember. Some reputable national reporter said the Ravens want him more than any other team. The Ravens definitely want him back, and I think that's the best spot for him. Now, let's bring it into the Fantasy Pros Championship. Right now, Lamar Jackson being drafted as quarterback 7, Derek, he is at the 606. Now, Joe Burrow is going at the beginning of the 5th. Justin Herbert's going about 4 picks in front of him in the 6th round. Jackson is in dangerous territory of slipping behind Trevor Lawrence, and then the next guy who could move ahead of him is Deshaun Watson, who's currently going at the end of the 7th. But let's talk about Lamar Jackson in the mid-6th round. Is this a player that you want to be in business with, again, when you're trying to win $1 million and beat thousands of other teams?
I'm already slamming early best balls, and my highest exposure quarterback right now is Lamar Jackson. here's the thing. Quarterbacks, and we're seeing this, and we've seen it over the last few years. There's a divide between the elites and the none. And having that type of division and that type of production that puts you over the top, we've seen it with Jalen Hurts. You've seen it with Josh Allen. You've seen it with Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. These guys are difference makers. So what do you want? You want a difference maker at quarterback. Okay, my attack point in early best balls right now is to take advantage of these bad ADPs. So Lamar Jackson going outside the top 5 quarterbacks is one of them. So I will enjoy that type of value for a guy that should be, if we knew everything was sewed up in Baltimore, he's fully healthy, contract, all that kind of stuff, or he already had a new landing spot, he would not be drafted where he's at currently. So right now, this is why you draft early best ball. Yeah. So you can take advantage of inefficient markets where people are off and they're not willing to embrace, because you put it this way, if you want to take down the millie, you got to embrace risk. You have to do that. And if you're not going to do that, you're probably going to end up not in the money. So I'm all in on Lamar Jackson. And even if you want to play this out, Eric, and you want to say, okay, what if he doesn't? Because that's the other fun part about early best balls. We can play out the scenarios of what if Lamar went to this team? What if he went to Atlanta? And so you can stack these kind of scenarios, and what you're going to get in the process is unique builds that maybe other people in these large field contests don't have. That's how you win.
I want to I mean, I don't think that, like, the segue here is to Michael Thomas. And I don't necessarily think that I know he doesn't represent the same upside as Lamar Jackson does, right? Yeah. But I think it's interesting what's going on with him right now. Now, Dennis Allen's the head coach of the Saints, said that he's not 100%. He said they're going to be cautious. He said they're going to take time. November is when Michael Thomas had toe surgery. And then in March, he signed a new deal to stick with the Saints, avoid free agency. But that deal is heavily incentive-laden. Michael Thomas is expected to be, well, I shouldn't say this. Dennis Allen expects him to be fully healthy and ready to go. But that is when they're going to put him on the field. That's not necessarily when he's going, like when the Saints are going to start the season. Thomas has only played in 10 games in the last 3 years, but this is a guy who was kind of a unicorn for fantasy football in the previous couple of years, set the record for most catches in a season. And now he has fallen all the way down to wide receiver 36 at the 709, right? He is going behind Mike Evans, Deontay Johnson, and Marquise Brown. He is currently right now, although I don't know how much longer, he is going to be able to stay in front of George Pickens, Treylon Burks, and Brandon Ayuk. I expect all three of those guys.
They're going to hop him. Yep.
But Michael Thomas right now, wide receiver 36 at the end of the 7th round. Derek, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like I agree with you here with what you're about to say. His ADP is going to fall a little bit more.
Yep. I think his ADP is going to fall a little bit more. And that's why in early best balls, I'm not pressing the button right now because I don't think we've seen the full cratering of his ADP. I think he gets into wide receiver 4 territory. When that happens, it's time to slam it because I'm all in on trying to draft him. Now, is he going to be amongst my highest exposure players? No. But am I going to have exposure to him? Because if he's going as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3, and he gets to, because early in the season last year, guys, we saw he was producing at wide receiver 2 levels, Balkman. So if that's the case, that's equity. Yeah. Not only if we're getting better quarterback play, a better offense, more scoring opportunities, because this offense is going to be improved from last year. So if that's the case, yeah, I think there's meat on the bone for Michael Thomas.
And it's one of those things too, you don't necessarily think of Michael Thomas as this big spike week performer that you would want in a national tournament like the Fantasy Pros Championship. But at the same time, there is value in players that can be steady eddies every single week and can he could easily have one of those 6 for 120 and 2 touchdowns.
And he mixes great with a differing build. Like if you're looking for, even if you play out the scenario of Michael Thomas getting hurt. Okay, so say even last year, okay? Let's play this out at Balkman. He starts out the year, you get about 6-7 games, wide receiver 2-ish production. If you marry Michael Thomas with, say, a rookie wide receiver, you could get steady wide receiver 2 production with even higher upside looking at how your roster build looks like. If you were to marry Michael Thomas with, say a rookie season Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you got the better of both halves. You know, the rookie starts off slow out the gate, goes gangbusters down the stretch, but Michael Thomas is hurt. Hey, let's go.
Is there any value, and this will be the first stack reference we have tonight, is there any value in getting a guy like Chris Olave, who you can get in the Fantasy Pros Championship in the mid-third? I already said you can get Michael Thomas coming up in the late 7th. And then Derek Carr is not a highly drafted guy at all in this format or in this national tournament. Derek Carr is a guy, God, I must have passed him in the ADP because there's no way
hard to do.
He's like he is so far down right now. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do the dreaded Control F. I thought I could find him. No, he's quarterback 23 in the 17th round. I mean, we talk about cheap stacks. 3rd round, 7th round, and then 17th round for Derek Carr. And Derek, like, I look at this from the standpoint of the AFC South is hardly a bunch of world beaters, right? And all of a sudden you can get those 3 guys somewhat cheaply, right? What about the Saints stack of those 3 players this year?
I'm not against it. I mean, I'm all in on buying high on Chris Olave because the ceiling is there. Like he put up numbers last year in his rookie season that where you can project he has alpha type of upside. So if I'm going to go with Olave, I don't have a problem going with Derek Carr because here's the other thing. We didn't see the Saints throw a whole lot last year and the year before, but their quarterback play was dog water. You know, I mean, I will say this, Andy Dalton played really well for him if you look at efficiency metrics, but the offense as a whole, not a lot of scoring opportunities. We still haven't seen what that Alvin Kamara situation is going to look like in that suspension. This all leads me to, could we see the Saints pass even more this year? Considering now they have weapons. You got Michael Thomas if he comes back healthy. You got Chris Olave. You got Juwan Johnson. They also have a late first, which they could easily take another wide receiver or somebody like Dalton Kincaid and add more weapons to this cupboard. So if you don't have a running back like Alvin Kamara, and I know that like Jamal Williams, I like him, but not necessarily somebody you're going to look at as like an integral cog. Like we're going to be a run first team. We're going to lean on Jamal Williams. Like that's probably not going to be the case. So they're going to throw more. Yeah, I'm totally fine with going cheap stacks for the Saints. Not as my primary stack, but as a secondary or a third, because where Carr is going right now, Eric, like you could just pick him up as a QB3.
Yeah.
And if he has spike weeks, if he has 3 or 4 spike weeks, he pays off.
The better boss is chiming in on this in the chat.
Yeah, right, I've seen the comments like
he's like Michael Thomas not going to be on my team. The Saints, and like I get it, like the Saints, and I think this is what you're saying, Derek, is like the Saints don't necessarily have to be a target, but it can be one of those builds that you get as the draft goes on. You don't have to target any of these guys if they fall into your lap. And I mean, even Chris Olave is a 3rd round pick right now. It's not like you have to rearrange your draft to get this stack on your team. And it doesn't have to be your only stack either, which we'll get into more as the program goes on tonight. Okay. One of the things we found out from Phoenix this week at the NFL owners meetings, you can now wear 0 if you are an NFL player, most NFL players, not all of them. Calvin Ridley immediately said that he was going to be changing his number to 0. And Calvin Ridley is an interesting case this year because we saw him, I don't know, I feel like ever since he was in college, we were talking about this guy because he was an older player coming into the NFL, which I know a lot of dynasty draft nicks that don't always like. He was a player that came into a situation with Julio Jones as the alpha in Atlanta till he became the guy. And now he's been suspended, reinstated, and now on a new team in Jacksonville that already paid a boatload of money to Christian Kirk. But that does seem to be on the come up as well. You know, Evan Ingram had a big year last year. You got franchise tag. He's going to be back. Christian Kirk, obviously, I just started to mention. And then Calvin Ridley's going to be there. Derek, I don't know how you feel about this early ADP, but it's a little bit too soon for me for Calvin Ridley. Wide receiver 25 at the 504 in Fantasy Pros Championship ADP. I feel like a lot of people are drafting him too close to his ceiling right now. And that's not a way I like to build my teams. I'm going to find somebody else at the 504. There's other guys, like he is going literally right behind Drake London, Chris Godwin, Michael Pittman, and Christian Watson. He's going ahead of guys like Jerry Jeudy, Mike Williams, Terry McLaurin, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. You look at Ridley right now in the early to mid 5th. I don't know. I don't see if there's a whole lot of draft value there for people who are trying to win $1 million.
So I'll push back a little bit. I like Calvin Ridley, and I'm willing to sit here like as a wide receiver 3 price.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to dive into that because I think you are going to see people that obviously were his ADP. People are drafting him at that spot. But here's the other thing we could talk about, Eric. The first video you see out of training camp, and Calvin Ridley is catching sideline passes. He's catching deep balls in practice from Trevor Lawrence. What is his ADP going to do? It's going to go even higher, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's going to probably settle somewhere as like a mid to low wide receiver 2. So to be honest, if I want Calvin Ridley exposure, I'm probably going to go after it right now. Like if I'm drafting in the Fantasy Pros Player Championship, that's probably one of the guys I'd like to target, because the other part about this is like Trevor Lawrence down the stretch was putting up these top 5, top 3 type of quarterback weeks with Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, and without a true, and Christian Kirk had a really good season. I am not trying to shade the man, but he's not a true number 1 wide receiver. And Calvin Ridley is. And for everybody that out there would say like, okay, well, what about the last season he had? The last time we saw him on the field with Atlanta? Okay, yes, the counting stats were not great. Also, what we didn't know at that time, we got confirmation in the Colts, is that Matt Ryan was done. He was cooked. Stick a fork in him. He was done. Calvin Ridley was awesome. If you look at deeper metrics, he was fantastic that season. It came down to quarterback play. He was 5th in route win rate. He was 3rd in win rate against man coverage. Those are things where you're taking the quarterback out of the equation and you're saying, what is the real math that tells me that is this guy still good or he's not? Calvin Ridley was still a baller, and people are going to find out. He's going to come out, and as long as he's healthy, tell me he's not going to come out with his hair on fire and trying to prove a point.
Well, I totally agree with you on almost everything you said. How much do you incorporate rust into your analysis with Calvin Ridley, knowing he hasn't played in a long time?
I'm not worried about it, to be honest. I'm not worried about him like forgetting how to play football and forgetting how to, get open after a year. What I will say is that the thing that you worry about the most with guys taking off time and stuff like that is these reacclimation injuries, like him pulling a hammy, things like that. But if he's been training the whole time and he's been ramped up, now there's a difference between like workout shape and football shape, but as long as he doesn't get banged up in training camp and stuff, which if he does, maybe you get a second kind of buy-in opportunity at that point. But that's really the only concern I have. Does he kind of get any soft tissue stuff with the time off? But we've seen a lot of guys take off time off. Like, didn't we hear that same kind of narrative, Eric, about like Jamar Chase coming out as a rookie? Like, what's he going to look like? It's college guy, so different scenario, but still, time off, same kind of concerns that people are going to have when they're drafting Calvin Ridley.
I want to talk about, and by the way, like you haven't fully convinced me about Calvin Ridley, but I'll tell you what.
That's okay. We got the rest of the show.
I was going to say, I don't think anybody's come as close as you have, right? Like I think we have to. I think sometimes as fantasy players, and I obviously as an employee of the FFPC, I don't play in the FFPC or anything the contest offers, but I do play in national tournaments. And I think one of the things that we tend to just lump together is our analysis on certain players when you're in a closed 12-team format. And we apply that same analysis to a national tournament, right? And I don't think you can. It's sort of like, for anybody who's playing DFS, it's very, very similar to cash game versus tournament, right? Or when you're trying to win like the Millie Maker or anything like that. I think there are a lot of similarities here. And while I might not be willing to take Calvin Ridley in a closed 12-team, friends, office, family league or whatever, I'd be much more willing, after hearing you, to take him in the mid-5th round when I'm trying to win $1 million
yes,
or
sir.
$500,000 or whatever.
You got to risk it.
So
you want the payoff, you got to risk it.
Right. And there's always a certain amount of like, oh man, should I do this? Should I go for it? Like, I think that it is very rare when you see a team, and I've interviewed all these people who have won $500,000 or $1 million or whatever. And you can always attribute it, not necessarily to a roster full of these guys.
Yeah.
but taking the leap on a certain guy here,
Mhm.
going a little bit heavier on the waiver wire to a certain player here. And I think Calvin Ridley is a really good example of doing that this year for sure.
So I've got not a motto, but kind of a way that I look at some of these best ball tournaments and GPPs. And really when it comes down to like if I'm playing DFS and you're willing to risk it to get first place, it's the same thing as when I'm building DFS lineups. If you're not feeling a little bit queasy in your stomach sometimes about taking some of those risks, or your butthole's not puckering, there's probably a problem. Like that's the kind of the spot where you're like, okay, it doesn't feel good, but it might feel good when I win the millie.
Right. It's totally right. I mean, it's accurate too. It's like,
It is.
it's what's the line where it's like if it doesn't scare you, it's not living or something like. I can't.
I mean,
remember what it was.
it's true though when you're trying to risk it and you're going, because here's the thing, we're playing for first place. If you're putting the 350 in, you don't want to come out of this contest like I won $1,000, yay! No, you want that millie, baby. And if you're going for the millie and you're going for first place, you're gonna have to take a few risks. You can't just draft the chalk.
All right, I know what it was. I had to Google it, but I found out from The Office.
Oh, this ought to be interesting.
From The Office. Derek, did you watch The Office when it was on here?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So you remember Robert California, who I think is one of the most underrated characters on that show.
Yeah.
When he has the big pool party episode, and he says, it's not a party if you don't do something that scares you. It's not a national tournament unless you do something that scares you.
Who's the guy that played his character?
James Spader.
Spader. Yeah. I love Spader so much, man. A lot of people don't like it, but that's why I watch The Blacklist, just because I love Spader. And a lot of people shade The Blacklist. They're like, oh God, it's still going. And I'm like, yeah, it's still going, baby. Just so I get to listen to James Spader talk.
Spader was one of those guys, like when he took over as boss for Michael Scott. Not that I want to turn this into an Office show.
So good.
But when he took over for Michael Scott, I didn't like it. I mean, obviously, whoever took over for him, I wasn't going to like it. But when I rewatched the James Spader as Robert California episodes, man, I love him now.
He was so much better than Will Ferrell, too, just to throw that out there. Like, no shade against Ferrell, but Spader crushed it.
I think, like, Spader's character, there was so much more to explore, where I felt like Will Ferrell's was a little bit a little too one-dimensional.
It's basically the same kind of awkward character that Will Ferrell has played for the last like 20 years. You know, it's the same guy. It's like Will Ferrell and Vaughn basically play the same person, just different movies.
Yes. Yeah. Which I like, but I understand.
Same thing with Owen Wilson. They're all the same dude, just a different circumstance.
Okay, so one of the things that people are hoping for in Dynasty Fantasy Football or regular Fantasy Football this year is that the Cincinnati Bengals tight end is going to get a lot of fantasy production again, similar to what Hayden Hurst did last year. You look at Hayden Hurst as a Cincinnati Bengal in 2022, 52 catches, only 414 yards and only 2 touchdowns, but he definitely put it together like when you needed it from a second tight end, because you didn't have to draft Hayden Hurst high last year. And if people get 52 catches for 400 plus yards out of Irv Smith this year, they're going to be happy. It's a 1-year deal. It's a prove it deal. And you look at what happened with Irv Smith last year, where he came in, he looked like he was going to be healthy. Then he got hurt again. The Vikings trade for TJ Hawkinson. And then that's it. Right. Irv Smith is still 24 years old. He turns 25 this coming year. Last year, Hayden Hurst had a 14% target share in that Cincinnati offense. The Bengals tight ends as a whole had a 17% target share. As we look at where Irv Smith is going now in the Fantasy Pros Championship, I'm happy to tell you he is free. He has not been drafted in the Fantasy Pros Championship yet. And for people who are looking for a third tight end or perhaps even a second tight end, there's some upside here, Derek.
I'm with you, Balkman. I'm totally with you, man. Like, and this comes down to like a greater point is to buy into good offenses. You take the cheap pieces and you buy into good offenses. And so how do you do that on the cheap or for free 99? You do that by taking tight ends, the ancillary guys that if this offense scores one crap ton of touchdowns, who's going to benefit? Probably your tight ends. And you take shots on the second, maybe like last pick the third running back, because if it's kind of weird on the depth chart, then that's how you get access to upside and good offenses. And if you look at Hayden Hurst, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. Like He cost you nothing last year. And he was also dinged up. So it's like, not only do you look at Hayden Hurst, but you look at some of the games like Mitchell Wilcox behind him had. If you lumped both those dudes together, you're looking at a tight end position that would have yielded you 6 weeks of top 12 production at the spot of free. So say Hurst was, because he had some weeks where he was dealing with injury and he was not a full-time player. So you saw more Wilcox. But if you put those two together, we're talking about Irv Smith as being like maybe having low-end tight end one upside if everything hits, or if nothing else, he's going to offer you the spike weeks. And we're talking about best balls and large field formats. This is one of the picks you should be making.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm totally with you on that. I mean, like, there is only stuff to be won here. There is no loss that you get if you're going to end up drafting Irv Smith. Now, Irv Smith, and people say, well, Bulky, what about you have T. Higgins, you have Jamar Chase, you have Tyler Boyd. We had all those guys last year, and Irv Smith still went over 50 catches. Now, who you may not have on this Bengals offense this coming year is Joe Mixon, who had 60, by the way, count them, 60 catches last year on 75 targets. Interesting stuff from Katie Blackburn today, who is the Bengals executive vice president. She was asked, is Joe Mixon going to be the starting running back in 2023? Quote, right now he's on the team. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. And we're going to count on him until that wouldn't be the case. But yeah, he's the guy. I think he's still got a lot of production in him. Blackburn also talked about the legal issues. Hopefully Mixon can get by those, is what she's saying. Mixon 2 weeks ago cleared in an off-field incident involving a shooting in his neighborhood. The Bengals no longer have the services of Samaje Perine. He took his talents to Denver. Zach Taylor's been talking up Travion Williams, a guy that I invested in and has been on many a dynasty taxi squad for me. That when they drafted Travion Williams a couple years ago, he is going to be 27. We don't know if he's going to be on the team. The question here is for you, Derek, when you look at Joe Mixon, who has fallen to running back 20, going now in the 6th round, the mid-6th round, behind Damian Pierce, behind Aaron Jones, behind J.K. Dobbins, behind Jahmyr Gibbs. Is he representing a buy for you in the Fantasy Pros Championship?
I'm avoiding him like the plague. Somebody else can step on that landmine. I don't want any part of Joe Mixon. I've looked at the Cincinnati Bengals as a quiet dark horse team to take a running back in the draft and cut Mixon. Like I was screaming in our Fantasy Pros Discord like last year. I was like, you got to trade him, buy, go away in Dynasty. Because his contract, and when you look at these things from a Dynasty angle, like these contracts get put out there in the space. It's like 4 years for $130 million. And it's really, if you look at the language and when the dead cap money falls off and teams can cut them and save money, it's really like, oh, it's not a 4-year contract. It's like, it's kind of like a 2-year deal. That comes in play with Joe Mixon because this year the team could cut him and save $7.2 million against the cap. This is the first year where his contract has really offered that type of savings. Last year, if they had to cut him, they could have saved about $3 million, but really they didn't have to, and he was coming off a good season. So this year, his efficiency last season dropped off a table. He was arguably terrible for the entire year. The only thing that was helping him was volume, those catches, and touchdowns. Because past that, he was not creating big plays. Samaje Perine was actually, if you look at different efficiency metrics, far and away a better running back last year. So I don't want anything to do with Joe Mixon. And if you're building early like Bengal stacks, I'm taking shots on running backs that could go day 1, day 2, get basically the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft that could possibly land there. Like in the sense of, could the Bengals, if he falls down the board into the 20s, the late 20s, could the Bengals take somebody like Bijan Robinson?
Oh,
I don't think it's off the table. Could they also take somebody in the second like a Zach Charbonnet or Jahmyr Gibbs? I don't think that's off the table. So again, we're talking about early before the NFL draft and getting these different roster builds that are going to give you a different complexion than everybody else out there playing out these scenarios. These are the shots I'm taking if I'm drafting Jamar Chase high, if I'm teaming in with Joe Burrow, and I'm looking at a different type of Bengals stack. Take a rookie running back. If you hit on who goes to possibly Cincinnati, it's Yahtzee. And grab Irv with your last pick. And your team's going to be way different.
All right, so let me piggyback on that and ask you this. So if you're in a dynasty league and you have Joe Mixon, knowing that this dude has not only avoided the Bengals signing a big running back in a really good free agent running back class, not only has he avoided that, he also doesn't have to contend with Samaje Perine this coming year. And number 3, he's still on the team. They haven't released him at all. So knowing all those things and basically knowing that he just has to dodge a few bullets in the NFL draft, how many cents on the dollar are you willing to take for Joe Mixon in your dynasty leagues right now, Derek? Is it 60? Is it 80? Has it gone up to like in the 90s based on how free agency has fallen for the Cincinnati Bengals running backs? What would you do if you own Joe Mixon right now in a dynasty league?
I'd take like 70, 75 cents. Like basically if you can get like a 24 first, and I'm not even talking like an early first, if you could get a 24 first for him, any first, I'd do that. I'd be like, auto accept, let's go. Because it's a liquid asset. It's going to do nothing but gain value. And Joe Mixon, right now, you're screaming and hoping that he holds value. But really, there's so many different outs that he could tank. Like, even if the Bengals don't cut him, if they draft a running back with good capital and he's stuck into a committee, you're looking at last year's Ezekiel Elliott. Well, I mean, okay, if he runs pure on touchdowns, yee, but if he doesn't, and he gets hurt or he gets cut, the bottom falls out. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, look, right now I'm trying to toss him into trades if I have him, or I'm trying to just trade up, like straight up trade him for any 24 first that I can get. And it's bye-bye, Mr. Mixon.
We are going to go bye-bye here just for a second. You can have the Better Sports Network, by the way, newsletter emailed to you every day. The only place to get our daily Better Bet plus exclusive offers, program alerts, special events, and our top moments. Register for free right now at bettersports.com. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the HSFFO, or the Road to This High Stakes Slowdown. I am joined by my co-host tonight, Derek Brown, the 2020 FSWA DFS Writer of the Year finalist. Fantasy Pros NFL. You know all of his work there. You hear him everywhere. You read him everywhere. We're certainly glad to have him on the show tonight. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're going to get into a lot of other stuff regarding the Fantasy Pros Championship. Derek is going to give you some targets that he thinks you should be targeting and trying to get as you try to win that $1 million in the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship, as well as the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network rolls on right now.
Lunch Money with Kyle and Ray. Weekdays at noon Eastern, presented by FantasyGuru.com.
I just opened my inbox, and there was a little connection to a story at the local paper about salad bars are coming back to St. Louis. We haven't had them since COVID, Ray. I'm a big salad bar guy. I love going to the local grocery mart and doing a salad bar. I get it. It's kind of disgusting. Hell, they put a sneeze guard over the food.
What is this? Some kind of force field around these vegetables.
That's the sneeze guard. You have to lean under it to get salad or sneeze on stuff.
But all these disappeared. Ray, I used to do the salad bar probably at least 2 times a week for lunch. And I would just load up, because I didn't have to cut anything. And I didn't have to buy like a whole cucumber, just to have a little bit of cucumber in my salad. I'm a big salad bar guy, but these things have been gone for 3 years. And I think I'm going to get back into the salad bar game, baby.
I used to love buffets and salad bars and all that kind of stuff, and I haven't been to one since COVID. I'll tell the story quickly. My nephew, who at the time, I want to say was 5, we were on a little trip, and we went to, it was a brunch and everything like that. They had ice cream. So my nephew, doesn't know any better because he's 5, puts his spoon in the ice cream, which is cool, right? He's going to spoon it out, fine. But he doesn't spoon it out into his bowl. He spoons it into his mouth and then sticks it back in the ice cream. And I'm like, so we had to talk to the manager. I had to get him to pull the ice. And I started thinking to myself, you look around, people are,
yeah, that 5-year-old germs wasn't going to hurt anybody.
No, but you know what I mean. Then you look at this old person and they're grabbing this. It's just, when you start thinking about it, I have a real struggle at this point with it now, because I've thought about it, but I used to love going to them previously.
Well, and everybody's using the tongs there. Everybody's touching those. God knows where those hands have been.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I've yet to see anybody actually sneeze under the sneeze guard. Maybe if I see that, Ray, it'll change my whole outlook.
Right? It's like
there is a reason the sneeze guard is there. It must happen enough that somebody said, we got to put these suckers in.
Yeah. So
But I love salad bars, and I'm back in, Ray. I've never gotten sick off one, so it's easy
Right.
for me to say, but
right.
I'm getting back in the salad bar game.
Okay. Good luck.
Good luck.
Make bets and follow your fantasy team while you buy, sell, and trade collectibles in real time. Only on Better Sports Network. It's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
20 minutes until the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the HSFF Hour, the RotoViz HSLD, the FFPC. He is Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros, the 2020 FFWA Fantasy DFS Writer of the Year finalist. We're doing this on opening day, which is kind of weird that we're doing a fantasy football show on opening day of the baseball season. My Milwaukee Brewers are already in midseason form, putting up 0 runs today in a loss to the Chicago Cubs. Derek, do you have a baseball team that you follow at all?
Oh, Eric, we had to bring this up. Yeah. Unfortunately, the team that I really care about, my San Francisco Giants, got blanked today by the Yankees. So
there's no shame in that. There is
scene.
no shame in getting shut out by the Yankees. There is shame in getting shut out against the Chicago Cubs, a team that may not win 80 games this year.
That's fair. It still hurts because right now I can't come on the program and be like, they're still undefeated, baby. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But San Francisco Giants live large, man. I've been a fan for a very, very long time. I used to wear number 25 for Barry Bonds before, he got big as a house. But massive, massive fan of the franchise. I love Tim Lincecum and Brian Wilson might be like my top 2, top 3 pitchers, favorites ever. So I'm gonna ride with them regardless if they win 50 games or 20.
Well, 3 things come to mind. Number 1, I had my uncle grew up in Milwaukee. He moved out into Silicon Valley, worked for Microsoft for many years. He resides in Northern California, like right in the Bay Area, and he's a huge Giants fan. I was always, I don't know why, but I was a huge Barry Bonds fan growing up when he was at the Pirates. And then when he went out to San Francisco, I was still I have a ton of Barry Bonds cards. I love Barry Bonds. I thought he was great. And so I got a bunch of Giants stuff. The other thing I'll mention as far as your Giants fandom goes, the 2 things I think of, Tim Lincecum, number 1, that there's a video out there of at a Giants game where the camera's just scanning the dugout and all the Giants are sitting there, and all of a sudden it gets to Tim Lincecum and he's like firing these sunflower seeds into his mouth like rapid fire, and then the camera quick cuts away. You can probably find it on YouTube or whatever the kids are watching, like TikTok or whatever nowadays. I'm sure it's still on there. That's my memory of Tim Lincecum. And then Brian Wilson, when he was on Chris Rose's show.
Oh, dang it, Eric! I was gonna bring that up. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Tell the story. Tell the story.
And the funny part about this is, oh man, I'm so glad that I'm not the only person that knows that, because when I bring this story up in conversation, everybody's like, "Huh?" So if you're watching this show, okay, or after the show, second screen experience people, go to YouTube, search Brian Wilson and the Machine, okay. And if you watch this clip, basically Brian Wilson is talking to Chris Rose, and this was live on television, and he's interviewing Brian Wilson right before, I think it was the World Series, and then went to go play the Rangers.
At Brian Wilson's house, yeah.
And Brian Wilson's sitting there talking and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, because you could see in the backdrop, there's like a hallway behind him in his house. This guy comes out of nowhere wearing nothing but black leather lace S&M gear and like a ball gag and a mask, and just walks behind him in the scene. And Brian's sitting there just kind of like, hey, Chris goes, "Whoa, who's that?" And he goes, "Who? What are you talking about, man?" And he's like, "The guy behind you. Who is that?" And he goes, "Oh, that's just the Machine. He's my neighbor. He comes over for a cup of sugar every now and then."
He doesn't say a whole lot.
He goes, he doesn't say very much. We don't talk a lot, but nice guy. The funny part about that, dude, and I would love that I'm not the only person that brought this up, Eric, is that I have a San Francisco Giants jersey that I got special made custom, and on the back of it, it has Brian Wilson's number, and it says the Machine on it. And nobody else gets the freaking joke, man. You just made my week.
It was so great too.
It was so because Chris Rose is freaking out. He's like, "That's how people get fired with stuff like this, man. Like, what are you doing?"
This was like before, like what we're doing, like now, where it's like normal to have like broadcasts from like people's offices or homes or whatever. This was like Brian Wilson like set up like a literal webcam or whatever in his house, and Chris Rose was in the studio and interviewing him. And and all of a sudden this happens, and he obviously didn't tell Rose. And Rose is, being a professional broadcaster, he's going to keep talking, not miss a beat. But he was definitely caught off guard. It's a tremendous moment in television history.
I think it's like probably like a top 10 television moment that like not enough people know about. So,
and then did you see?
We're talking about this.
Did you see it's opening day? We could talk a little baseball, but did you see the follow up when
he Wilson, interviewed him at the World Series?
Yeah, and he's like, maybe we should ask the machine. And Chris Rose immediately starts shaking his head like, no, we're not going to bring the machine.
We're not going back there. And Brian Wilson is like, you can tell on the inside he is like dying, just loving it. Every second of it. It was so good because it was in the celebration. I think it was like when they were interviewing them right after they won the World Series, or maybe it was like right after Game 3 or something like that. It was again, this is why Brian Wilson is probably my favorite pitcher ever in Major League history.
Guy who grew out a huge beard. Man. He dyed his beard. He
went to LSU too. So I'm originally from Louisiana. So he went to LSU. So got to watch him in college and stuff too. So,
if we can somehow rein it back to fantasy football, which I don't know if we're going to be able to do it.
We went totally off the rails, but man, I'm here for it because that is a story that the masses need to hear.
They do, yes. The Fantasy Pros Championship is live at myffpc.com. You can win $1 million, just a $350 entry fee. Register by June 1st. And draft by June 15th for a free $35 league credit. You can do that up to 3 times at myffpc.com. Well, if you're going to join it, we might as well give Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros an opportunity to talk about some of his targets in this right now. Well, I shouldn't say targets. I'm going to give you some players, and you tell me if they are a target for you in this competition. Now, this is a situation. I'm gonna go right to Cam Akers. This is a situation where it's not a best ball. You manage this league. Right. And when you manage this league, you'll be able to insert guys in lineups from week to week. You'll be able to cut guys from week to week. Cam Akers as running back 22 right now at the 606. Does that represent a good investment for you? About right? Or is this a guy that you shouldn't be drafting there?
That's a fantastic investment. I'm all in on Cam Akers again. And I know that people have heard me talk about Cam Akers. And yes, I'm a Cam Akers stan. But really, even an unbiased opinion on this, if you look at what Cam Akers did down the stretch last year, we do not need to dismiss this. Inside of a broken offense, they had rejects and who knows what in Baker Mayfield playing quarterback, no Cooper Kupp, all these different things. The entire offensive line was basically on the IR. And people are leaving Cam Akers for dead out there, and I don't get it. Like, I think it's just, honestly, you can't even call it recency bias, Eric, because the most recent thing is from weeks 13 through 18, he was the RB6 in fantasy points per game. So you can't say it's recency bias, because if that was the case, he'd be drafted a lot higher. The Rams don't have many picks to speak of. What they do have, like inside the top 3 rounds, they're not going to spend on running back. They're not going to do that. They have too many other holes on that roster that they have to fill before week 1. So you're looking at, okay, he's going to get all the volume. He got all the volume last year. He was a top 10 running back when he got the volume inside of a broken offense. And now you're drafting him as a low-end RB2? Yes. Give me all the Cam Akers I can handle.
And Better Boss chiming in too. He would take him as early as the 4th round. And he's
I don't have a problem with that.
Mid 6th round, outstanding value right now. Yes. You're looking at Cam Akers right now going behind guys like Isaiah Pacheco. He is going behind the aforementioned Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce, Jahmyr Gibbs.
In FFPC. He's going behind Isaiah Pacheco, who will not and does not catch passes.
Right.
Okay. Exactly. Great picks for Pacheco, people.
But I think that's more of a commentary on like the Chiefs. Like, we don't know exactly what their plan is at running back. and
Yeah.
people are just taking a stab at it, with Pacheco there. I think that's what it is. But I mean, we already talked about Joe Mixon, like Cam Akers. I'm with you. He should be going ahead of Joe Mixon.
Take Cam Akers over Joe Mixon
Absolutely.
easily. Their ADPs should be flipped.
A guy who is going a little bit later than Cam Akers, and I think he's been another polarizing guy in free agency. David Montgomery goes northeast, essentially, from Chicago to playing for the Detroit Lions. He's running back 25. He's going at that 6-7 turn right now. He's behind DeAndre Swift and Javonte Williams. He is ahead of Rachaad White and Miles Sanders. Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think we're going to see a flip between Swift and Montgomery and ADP here shortly?
Oh, Eric, you're just reading all my commentary out of the Fantasy Pros Discord. Like, I've been screaming to people in early best ball drafts, these ADPs are going to flip. Like, I have an article right now live on Fantasy Pros of my best ball ADP risers. David Montgomery's, where's DeAndre Swift getting drafted at right now, Eric? Like Swift, RB 17, 18, somewhere in there?
No, he's lower than that, but he's still ahead of Montgomery. He's fallen to running back 23 at the 607. Montgomery's running back 25 at the 612.
I will take David Montgomery handedly over DeAndre Swift. Their ADPs should be flipped. David Montgomery is in a fantastic spot right now. And I understand that David Montgomery isn't the flashiest running back in the NFL. Hell, Jamal Williams wasn't last year when he put up top 20 numbers. And I'm not telling you that David Montgomery is going to score 15 plus touchdowns. I'm not saying that at all. What I will tell you is that David Montgomery could easily own this backfield. And all the DeAndre Swift stands out there don't want to hear it. They never want to hear it. Mm-hmm. But Detroit has tried to hand this backfield over to DeAndre Swift multiple different times. And whether it's injuries, underproduction, all these different things, he has not been able to take the reins and hold on the entire season. David Montgomery can, and he has. This guy has handled over 80% opportunity shares at times in Chicago. So Detroit said, okay, we want a guy to handle all the work in the backfield or most of the work that can also be an early down grinder, but can play in the passing game. And then guess what? We're not echoing to defenses what the heck we're going to do. Last year it was like, okay, Jamal Williams on the field. Okay, they're probably going to run the ball. DeAndre Swift is on the field. Okay, they're probably going to pass the ball. This year, David Montgomery's on the field. Whoa, what are they going to do? I don't know. David Montgomery has been a very good pass catcher at times in the NFL. He's good enough to where I'll say this, Eric. He's going to steal pass routes and passing downs handily from DeAndre Swift. I think David Montgomery is a fantastic value. We've already seen him in his past put up RB1 numbers. Now inside of an offense that was top 10 in red zone scoring attempts per game last year. Could be better this year with Jamison Williams and whoever they add in the draft. Yeah, David Montgomery is a massive, massive buy.
And the flip side to this, and a lot of the people who are anti-David Montgomery will tell you, well, Derek, why would I invest in a guy like that? Even with all what you're saying, where he's going to take pass routes away from Swift, and because he doesn't have that breakaway ability, can he still be a Spike League guy, a potential league winner at the end of the 6th round when he has been historically one of the lowest rated running backs as far as breakaway runs, like runs, 20 plus yards in the NFL over the course of his career? Because I think that's what's holding people back from saying, hey, I need to be drafting this guy a lot earlier than where he's going right now.
He's not going to hit home runs, but he doesn't need to. He doesn't have to hit home runs. He's never hit home runs at a high rate. And what has he done in his past? He's already got 2 top 12 seasons under his belt in points per game without hitting home runs. Mm-hmm. And now we're airdropping him into a better offense and a better offensive line. So for everybody that's like, well, he doesn't hit home runs. I don't care if he hits home runs. If he gets consistent 10 to 15 yard chunk plays and he scores touchdowns, score points.
From listening to you over the course of the last couple of months, and longer than that, obviously, but I'm just saying specifically for this next question or the last couple of months, seeing your tweets, why is Jaylen Warren a smart investment in the 13th round for Fantasy Pros Championship drafters?
RB what? Fill in that blank for me
55.
right now.
5-5. Double nickel.
He's free equity, man. He's free. He's free equity. I don't understand it because, and you tell me this. Let's compare the differences here, Eric. Where are the other premium handcuffs being drafted? RB40s, late RB30s. Like, where are those guys going right now in FFPC ADP?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably accurate. I mean, you're looking at, well, I mean, I guess Madison right now is still a backup. He's running back 36. You're looking at Jamal Williams at running. Well, Jamal Williams is running back 38. Kamara is running back 32. So you tell me who the handcuff is there. But like in that area, you're right.
What's the difference between Madison and Jaylen Warren, besides the fact that actually Jaylen Warren is really good at football? And I'm not saying Madison's terrible, but he's not a guy that's giving you a lot of juice. All of his efficiency metrics dropped off the table last year. Jaylen Warren was really good last year. In small samples, like the ability that he has, we're looking at a guy that legit, from weeks 5 through 18, he offered you standalone value anyway. He gave you 6 weeks last year in the part-time role of RB3 or better production. So we've already seen him have a standalone role in the sense that he's giving you production. So if you're going 0 RB, the thing about Jaylen Warren is he was immensely efficient with the work he got last year. Mike Tomlin said, we got to get him more involved. Najee Harris has not been efficient with his work over the last 2 seasons. Jaylen Warren is better in the passing game than Najee Harris. You could look at all kinds of different metrics that are going to tell you this. So the Steelers could become a full-blown committee, much less if anything happens to Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren is going to be a 3-down back, and he's not being priced where he should be in that premium handcuff tier. Jaylen Warren should be going in the RB40s, the late RB30s range, and he's not. I don't even know if that's ever going to happen because I keep shouting about him and everybody's like, yeah, he's okay. He's great. He's a Steeler. Najee's good. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, man. I'll keep just drafting Jaylen Warren outside of RB50 price, which is absolutely mispriced, all day.
Shifting receivers now. Marquise Brown and Cortland Sutton. Who represents the better buy? Marquise Brown, wide receiver 35 at the 6'7" turn, kind of where David Montgomery's going right now. Marquise Brown at the 6'7" turn, or Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 44 at the 8'9" turn. And if you want to say both are in good investments, that's fine if you want to do that as well.
Both are really good investments. I say if you're picking one of these guys, I'll go with Cortland Sutton because I think he's being left more for dead. And there's some other differentiators we can talk about here, but I'm in with getting both of these guys because here's the thing. Marquise Brown, you said what's his wide receiver ADP right now?
Wide receiver 35 at the 6'7" turn.
Okay, first of all, that ADP is going to change the moment the DeAndre Hopkins gets traded. As soon as he is out, his ADP is going up. So if you want exposure to a cheap Marquise Brown and you don't want to pay wide receiver 2 prices, but you want wide receiver 2 production, then you need to draft Marquise Brown right now because we've already seen what it looks like, Eric. Like last year, we have already seen this play out. Weeks 1 through 6, he's wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game. So you're telling me you can get that wide receiver, and we've already seen this entire scenario play out of what happens if Hopkins is not on the field. I get it's a different play caller. I get all of that kind of stuff.
And I would assume Kyler Murray is not going to be throwing the ball.
You can assume that.
Right
and the thing about it is Colt McCoy is still going to feed him. Colt McCoy is still a proficient passer. Like, is he fantastic? And do we care about him for fantasy? No. Is he good enough to get the ball to Hollywood Brown? Yes. So I like both of these guys for the reasons like Marquise Brown's ADP is going to spike up immediately as soon as Hopkins goes. So you got to draft him now. Cortland Sutton, people are probably going to stay low on him regardless. So if you're looking at a guy that you need to get exposure to right now, if you're picking between the two, it's Marquise Brown because of that ADP spike is coming. So get exposure to him now, and you can wait on Cortland Sutton. You can mix exposure for him because, I mean, the things that are already would have spiked his ADP have already kind of happened, and it hasn't done anything because people got burned on it last year. Like Sean Payton is there. The offense is probably going to still be in pretty much intact. Sean Payton's already come out and said, you know what? We're not in the business of trading talented players. We want talented players, and we want to win ball games. And for everybody that looks at Cortland Sutton's production last year, even if he doesn't do anything better than last year, and that's a low bar, he was wide receiver 40 in fantasy points per game. So even where he's going in current drafts, there's still a little bit of equity versus where you're drafting him versus production. Much less if you look at the deeper metrics on him last year, this guy was top 12 in open rate per ESPN analytics. So you're looking at, okay, yes, his production lagged last year, but you're looking at deeper metrics, like kind of like what I talked about with Calvin Ridley. Like, how do we separate bad quarterback play from really good wide receiver play? Courtland Sutton, if you look at the metrics that he could control, because he can't control whether he gets catchable targets or not. The things he could control, he was 12th in open rate last year. He was 23rd in route win rate. He was 10th in win rate against man coverage. All of this screams that Courtland Sutton is a buy. That if this offense is run and this scheme is run better and Russell Wilson actually puts up league average play, which here's the other thing. We saw Russell Wilson down the stretch in the last, I think it was 5 or 6 games off the top of my head, put up multiple weeks as a top 10, top 6 fantasy quarterback. So he's still got that in his bag. As much as people don't want to talk about it, there should not be this massive discrepancy, because I'm going to turn this back to you, Eric. Where's Jerry Jeudy going in drafts right now? He's probably top 24 wide receiver.
I don't know if he's that high, but he's got to be close. Jerry Jeudy right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship, wide receiver 26 at the 505.
That gap should not exist. That is baking in so much of what people think is a certainty of, oh, Jerry Jeudy's the number 1 wide receiver. Says what? What is that? Who says that? Like, has Sean Payton come out and said, you know what? Jerry Jeudy's going to be our alpha this year. No, he has not. So all of this certainty is being baked into these ADPs that Courtland Sutton is trash, that Jerry Jeudy is the number 1, and these things are not set in stone. So this is, again, you're talking about how do you game the system in the sense of how do we take advantage of inefficient markets? This is it.
And we're always, I mean, you have to look for that when, again, national tournament versus a closed 12-team league. This is what you need to know in order to try to take down $1 million in the Fantasy Pros Championship. I do want to touch on tight ends. Obviously, 1.5 per catch for tight ends in the Fantasy Pros Championship with FFPC scoring. Darren Waller, no longer in Las Vegas. He's in the Big Apple, or New Jersey, I guess, playing for the New York Giants. Tight end 7 at the 604 right now. He is going at least a round and a half behind Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, and Kyle Pitts. He is going ahead of Evan Engram, who is about a half round behind him right now. But Darren Waller kind of all on his lonesome in the mid-6th round. What should fantasy players be doing with Darren Waller, especially if they skip the elite tight ends and he's staring you in the face in the early 6, mid-6? You got to jump on that, right?
I'll sit here and say this. If you're drafting all the Darren Waller that you can right now, like I am, you're not skipping the elite tight ends. You're just getting the cheapest one that people are sleeping on. This is the thing. I put a tweet out the other day about Darren Waller as my tight end 2 this year. And people are like, what? And I'm like, what? Why is this a hot take? I don't understand why this is a hot take. I don't get that. We've seen this guy literally lead all tight ends in targets before. You look over the last few years outside of the 1-loss season with Josh McDaniels and his idiocy in with the Raiders. Outside of that, Darren Waller has commanded targets at a crazy level. The last 3 seasons before 2022, his targets per route run, this is where he ranked, Eric, 6th, 2nd, 4th. His target shares, 3rd, 1st, 4th. His targets in the league, and one of these, mind you, he only played 11 games, 8th, 1st, 3rd. So now a team trades for him, pays up for him, and he's surrounded on a depth chart with a bunch of schmoes. We've already seen that play out. Darren Waller went ham. What is to stop him from doing that this year outside of health? And again, people are baking so much certainty into these ADPs. Injury doctors in their crystal balls on Twitter just already know he's going to get hurt. There's no way he stays healthy. Oh, okay, sure. Look, if you are that certain that you could predict that type of future, you need to go buy a lotto ticket. You need to sit here and go invest in all types of other things that are long shots, because you are a savant if you could just magically know that. off the top of your head. So no, Darren Waller is a crazy, crazy buy right now. I'm going to get all my exposure that I possibly can right now because the other part about this, his ADP is probably going to go up some more. And even if him being drafted outside the top 5 tight ends, I think is blasphemous. And much less where he's going right now, you want access to elite tight end play when you're playing on FFPC because, whether people want to sit here and go dive into and really lean into the premium format or not, this is how you get access to that elite type of production, and you're not paying the Travis Kelce, the Mark Andrews premium at all.
All right, so let me ask you this, because you said he's your tight end too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get why he's behind Kelce at tight end too. That makes sense. I get why he's ahead of Pitts. I get why he's ahead of Kittle. I even get why he's ahead of Mark Andrews for you because of the Lamar Jackson unknown, right? But with what we saw last year from TJ Hawkinson moving from Detroit to Minnesota, knowing that basically that offense is very, very similar to what it was last year, why do you like Darren Waller, Derek Brown, over TJ Hawkinson this year?
Because most or some of TJ Hawkinson's ceiling's already been baked into his ADP, and Darren Waller's is not at all. So, and this is not me not liking TJ Hawkinson, but people have already kind of sniffed out, okay, well, he's going to get a bit of volume in Minnesota. The thing about TJ Hawkinson is we've never seen him produce at an elite level as far as efficiency goes. Has he been really good? Sure. Has he been top 12, top 10? Sure. Has he ever been at the point where he has produced elite top 3, top 5 efficiency metrics? No. And the other thing about this, Minnesota could take a wide receiver in the first round. So you're looking at a washed Adam Thielen was his competition behind Justin Jefferson last year. You bring in fresh legs with a first-round wide receiver this year to compete with him and Justin Jefferson. I'm not saying Justin Jefferson's in any worry about a target share, drop at all. No, that's not happening. But TJ Hawkinson, if we're talking about a guy who is a good tight end or an above-average tight end, but he was boosted by mega volume, and now he's got to contend with a better receiving option, possibly, than Adam Thielen was at his point in his career last year, that spells some worries about TJ Hawkinson. And I think he's being drafted, I'm not going to say at his absolute ceiling, but it could be close to it.
The last thing I want to say about this with this Darren Waller, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm hammering you over this.
It's fine,
thing.
Eric. I want you to buy a Darren Waller jersey before we're done with this.
Okay. You look at the Giants, right? They're probably in the market for an outside wide receiver, but they have loaded up on so many slot guys this offseason. Jamison Crowder, they re-signed Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson, obviously still there. Paris Campbell, they signed Isaiah Hodgins from last year. I wonder how much of a duplication of skills do you view between all these slot receivers that the Giants have in Darren Waller? Clearly, you're not fazed by it. Why is that?
No, I'm not fazed by it because the thing about it is they're gathering depth chart guys. Last year was basically everybody got hurt. Wan'Dale was in and out of the lineup. Darius Slayton was banged up a little bit. They had to go to Isaiah Hodgins. Kenny Golladay was, they found out he was dead for real. And all their depth was depleted. Right now, all those different slot options they're signing, like the Jamison Crowders of the world, all that is to say, look, slot is an important component of how I want this offense to run. So I need league average type of players that can play well if called upon, if Wan'Dale is not going to be ready to go, because you're not going to see all those guys starting. I think that their 3 wide receiver set is going to be whoever's healthy and wins the slot battle out, not assuming it's Wan'Dale out of camp, and who are going to be the outside guys. Okay, it's going to be Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins. So all those other depth guys is basically to say, okay, we just want to make sure we have competent slot wide receiver play, and we're going to make sure we sign a bunch of guys to do that. And that's all that comes down to for me. And none of those guys have shown the ability to command targets at an elite level like a Darren Waller.
I think that will conclude the redraft portion of the show tonight. We're going to step out and take a quick break. But when we come back, if you've paid attention to this program so far and you're like, Balky, where is all the dynasty stuff from Derek? It's coming up. We're going to get into rookie rankings. We're going to talk about Izzy Abanikanda, We're going to talk about Tyjae Spears, Zach Charbonnet, who I know we've touched on already, and then Zay Flowers. We cannot have Derek Brown on this podcast and not talk about Zay Flowers. So we're going to do that, or not on this podcast, but on the show. We're going to talk about Puka Nacua, Jalen Hyatt, and much more. That is all coming up in hour 2. By the way, if you haven't, update the new and improved Better Sports Network app so you have all the latest developments we've made to give you a first-class experience. It's free in the App Store and Google Play. He is Debro_FFB on Twitter. I am at Eric Balkman on Twitter. Eric Balkman, Derek Brown, FFPC Fantasy Pros. Kicking it live here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Moose and Keith. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Calvin Ridley yesterday, he applied for reinstatement from the National Football League.
Ridley, Kirk, Zay Jones, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence. That is crazy potent on offense.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I mean, Ridley's great.
I think Trevor Lawrence is a guy I want in fantasy this year.
I think you're probably right. I think they're just going to get better and better. First off, Peterson's a wonderful offensive mind, a great head coach, and we've seen that and saw that this year as Jacksonville made it to the postseason. And Trevor Lawrence, anybody that questioned whether or not he could play in the National Football League or just how good he was going to be in the NFL, those questions were answered this past season as in the second half of the year. Statistically speaking, he was a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. That's how good Trevor Lawrence is. You throw Calvin Ridley into the mix, it's going to be great. Yeah, I think Lawrence is a guy you want. I think Ridley's a guy you want. Clearly, Travis Etienne is going to be one of those early, first-round selections as well, being the dual-threat running back that he is, not only running, but also catching the ball out of the backfield, Keith, and the ability to take something small and take it to the house. Take a 5-yard dump pass, make a guy miss in the open field, and he's gone. I mean, you saw that with Travis Etienne this past season for Jacksonville. Yeah, sky's the limit. I mean, I think you're going to go from a team in the year span where you wanted no part of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you're looking at fantasy football to where you want as many Jaguars as you possibly can because they're going to be really, really productive. And let's see if they get their tight end back as well, who had
Evan Ingram was great.
And Evan Ingram, who was great this past season.
Yeah. I mean, if they keep that whole core together, their offense is going to be one of the best in football. Like, I legitimately think that they could be one of the best offenses in football.
Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, then you throw
Ridley,
Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, a good offensive line, and you've got Doug Peterson being creative calling.
Right?
And you look at that division. The Colts are a mess.
Yep.
Titans
look like they're on the downslide.
Titans are on the downslide, right? That window is clearly closed. And then you got the Houston Texans.
Years away from relevancy.
Yeah.
I mean, Jacksonville could win 11 games next year.
Moose and Keith. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network. I am at Eric Balkman on Twitter, High Stakes Fantasy Football, or RotoViz, High Stakes Lowdown, the FFPC. He is Derek Brown at Debro_FFB on Twitter. You know him from Fantasy Pros, at Fantasy Pros on Twitter as well. And we are... This is like a record, Derek, I think, for getting into hour number 2, the latest we ever have, is we're already 13 minutes past the top of the hour. I want to remind everybody, we're going to be talking about Dynasty Orphans and Dynasty Fantasy Football in this section or segment of the show. You can adopt the Dynasty Orphan today with the FFPC. Reduced price teams are available, ranging from $77 all the way up to $2,500. MyFFPC.com is where to go. That's MyFFPC.com. Pick up a Dynasty Orphan as low as $1, and you can, and I always say this too, like, there are a lot of reasons that teams get orphaned. It's not necessarily because the team is in bad shape. Sometimes it could be, people get married, people get divorced, people have families, people get new jobs, people lose jobs, stuff like that. There's a lot of things that go into it. I can tell you this, that there's a lot of really good teams over at myffpc.com. Okay, so let's talk rookies specifically. Number one, a guy that I feel like I've talked about with a lot of high stakes players and a significant amount of people on this show. Izzy Abanikanda from Pittsburgh. I know there's a lot of people that really like him. I know a lot of people are sleeping on him right now. Why should he not be slept on in your dynasty rookie draft, Derek?
I mean, the guy just posted some ridiculous athletic scores, and it marries so well with this film, Eric. If you turn on the tape for him, and it also spells out in his metrics we'll get to in a second, but he just concluded his pro day. He ran a 4.3940. He's a 98th percentile athlete. Plus, he checks the boxes for the size on a guy that can handle the workload. He's 5'10", 216. With that type of athlete, I mean, really with Abanikanda, I wanted to see, because he didn't run at the combine, which honestly ticks me off because I had a lot of prop bets and I was betting the unders, and I was like, he's going to run a 4.3. I was screaming this to my colleagues. He's going to run a 4, and he ran a 4.3. And so with him out there, it plays out in his metrics too, because you're looking at a player that is his tackle breaking metrics over the last 2 years great? No, but that's not how he wins. He wins with speed, hot, nasty, dirty, raw speed, baby. And it comes through. Like, he was 36th in breakaway run rate last year amongst all FBS running backs with at least 100 carries. So that's where like my comp for him, Eric, was Raheem Mostert. Mm-hmm. Not the biggest guy, but if you give him a crease, he's going to daylight, baby. And he's got the speed to hit home runs. And so why do we want him in best balls and such? We want spike weeks, dude. Like, that's how we win. So how do you get the spike weeks? We want deep passing. We want long plays. You want downfield shots, and you want guys with wheels that could break off 60-yard runs. Abanikanda, and the other thing about this, for any kind of ideas, because for a lot of these rookies, after your top 3 running backs right now in dynasty rookie drafts, it's kind of like, where the heck are these guys going to go? Mm-hmm. Projecting draft capital for a lot of those backs is a very slippery slope right now, because some play, and I'm in a few leagues where we're degens, we're psychos. We do our rookie drafts before the NFL draft, which is really, you're betting on your work as an evaluator of prospects. So if you're good at that, hey, the draft capital coincides. We're sitting pretty. But with Abanikanda putting up those type of numbers at his pro day, it's proof of concept, and he just helped himself as far as capital goes. So, I mean, I looked at him before this as maybe like a day 3 kind of guy. He could have pushed himself with those workout metrics into round 3. And if that's the case, he might walk into a situation where he competes to be the lead of a committee from the hop.
So, I guess Abanikanda, the interesting thing with him is, like, he will be drafted in the Fantasy Pros Championship, or even, in rookie drafts, as an injury away type guy, because if the guy goes down in front of him, this is a guy who can not only give you third down, pass catching ability, but first and second down banger stuff too, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, he can handle the workload at least enough to where we care about it in fantasy. Like, he can handle 15, 20 touches on a weekly basis. He has the frame to do that. So you're not really concerned about volume with him.
Mm-hmm. What about Tyjae Spears? And I feel like this is a guy we've been talking about since, like, the Senior Bowl, right? Because that's when everybody was sort of enlightened to what he can do out of Tulane. And I think this is a guy that, again, you don't like these older running backs coming to the NFL necessarily. You like the younger guys. But Spears, I don't know, man. He might be a little bit different. I don't know if you have a good feel of whether he's a day 2 or a day 3 type guy, but what is he going to be for fantasy football this season?
I think he can absolutely go on day 2, considering he's done nothing but help himself throughout this entire process, Eric. I was down there at Senior Bowl in Mobile, and Tyjae Spears was just putting on a freaking clinic, man. Like, there's still, you can go look up the tweets. Tyjae Spears running whip routes and leaving dudes in the shadow realm like, where'd he go? On the fields. And he's showing the pass game utility that we really didn't see a ton of at Tulane. He also looked decent enough in pass protection drills. He's got the juice because he ran under a 4.5. And all of his metrics last year at Tulane scream this dude can break some tackles. Like, he's top 20 in breakaway run rate, yards after contact per attempt, PFF elusive rating. I think he gets the capital. And one of the things that people I'm not going to say they will gloss over, but one of the things that also pushes him up the board versus somebody, and I'm not going to say he's going to get drafted above Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think that's happening. But if you're looking at differentiators and stuff, Tyjae Spears is a guy, and tell me, we don't see this very often, Eric, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. We don't see it very often where players are listed at certain collegiate weights, okay? And they actually come in, and it's a good thing, they come in heavier whenever they weigh in. We don't see that happen. 9 times out of 10, he's listed at 220. Oh, dear Lord, he's 198. He's listed at 230. Huh? He's 205. What is this? Tyjae Spears, he weighed in at 204. That puts him in a realm where he's big enough to sit there and handle weight. And people, they're like, okay, with the 200-pound kind of threshold that we look at, 210 for running backs and handling volume, they say, oh, they snub their nose like, oh, it's an arbitrary cutoff line. If you look at volume over the last few years for running backs, it is not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary at all. It's really easy to pull it up. You can count on one hand, Eric, maybe 2 hands. I think it was like 5 or 6 running backs. You can count on one hand last year about the running backs in the NFL that were under 200 pounds that had over 150 touches. It is not arbitrary at all.
Mm-hmm. And like it's simple, right? It seems so simple that we can look at it, like a weight, limit on that. But and that brings up the whole. I have another show I do here in Northeast Wisconsin. And we talk about the NFL draft and we talk about the future for the Packers and what have you. Mm-hmm. And my big thing is relative athletic score, which is something, a tool I've used for fantasy.
I love
football.
Raz.
And it is, and I can't remember who did the study, and I want to give him credit and I can't, or her credit. I don't know who did it, but a study that out of it's something like 81% of the NFL, the players in the NFL had a relative athletic score of 8 or above, or so. It is a highly predictive metric for future employment in the NFL, and that's what I always come back to. That, and you look at what the Packers have done. Not that I want to turn this into a Packers show, but since Brian Gutekunst took over as GM, they have always on day one and round 2 for sure, they've always invested highly in players with a high relative athletic score. After that, when it gets to round 3, day 3, then they kind of go away from that, which is fine. But they put a high emphasis, and I think NFL teams do this as well, put a high emphasis on the stuff they can't coach. You can't coach speed. You can't coach strength. You can't coach raw athletic ability, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when we look at a metric like that, it screams okay, why are we ignoring this metric for this guy, right? Rookie running back rankings. Most people, and I think they're being drafted this way in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now. Bijan Robinson, number 1, excuse me. Mm-hmm. Jahmyr Gibbs, number 2. And then number 3, I don't want to say it's a consensus, but it's getting to be that point where Zach Charbonnet is sort of the de facto number 3 running back. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing it the same way? Is Charbonnet your number 3 running back?
I'm seeing it the same way, and Charbonnet is not my number 3 running back.
Oh, okay.
Charbonnet is my RB2. He is behind only Bijan. I love Charbonnet. And some of this comes down to Jahmyr Gibbs weighing at the 199. The other part of this is Charbonnet. I would be very, very surprised if he does not go in round 2 or round 3. Very surprised. And if you look at him, and you were just talking about, and I don't want to jump the gun or go back too far, but you were talking about, just to give some context, you were talking about RAS scores, mm-hmm. Eric. Mr. Abanikanda, 9.8.
He's filthy.
And just for the people at home, 10 is the highest you can get. 10. He was 9.8. Mr. Zach Charbonnet, 8.7, baby. Mm-hmm. And these are good. These are good scores. So I love Charbonnet. He has got the build to handle a ton of volume. His pass game utility is also being slept on to a certain extent because he's 13th in PFF receiving grade last year. He's shown that he can handle volume. Is he a home run burner? No, but he doesn't have to be that. He doesn't have to be that at all, considering, the guy isn't slow. He ran in the 4.5s anyway. That's not his game. He is a guy that should be airdropped into an offense and should be garnering 15 plus touches from the word go. And I don't have those questions about him, but I have the questions about Jahmyr Gibbs. Is he going to be that type of workhorse? Is he going to just be faster DeAndre Swift, which was my comp for him? If that's the case, he might not pay off on all the hype and hope that people have. Zach Charbonnet is the guy that I really want to target in best balls right now.
What about the tight ends? I look at the tight end class. Most people have said that this is a really good tight end class. We had the kid from, help me out, the guy who had a 10.0 RAS score.
Zach Kuntz.
Yep. He was from Old Dominion. Old Dominion. Yep. That's what it was. Yeah, Zach Kuntz.
Now his history, he came from athletic freakdom that is known as Penn State, because everybody in Penn State comes out with these stupid athletic scores like Barkley, Gesicki, all those guys. Anyway, all those guys, like he's a stupid athlete, but he came from stupid athlete land.
I think so. Kuntz is interesting. Luke Musgrave is a guy I've heard a lot about. Michael Mayer originally was the guy that he's going to be the number one tight end draft. And quite frankly, he probably still will be. But I think there's some athleticism concerns with him. The name that I have seen shoot up over the last 2 or 3 weeks from DraftNix has been Dalton Kincaid out of Utah, given what he can do. But and you could talk about these guys individually as well. But the rookie tight end class, FFPC rookie drafts, FFPC dynasty, man, you got to be loving life, because there is a lot of building blocks that you can get in this draft that can be future starters for you.
Oh, absolutely. And this is why you're looking for these second round picks right now in rookie drafts, because in these tight end premium formats, you can get a lot of these guys that are going to fall to the second, depending on what drafts you're in. And I do not make it a habit to comp legends and high-end players to people just for the sake of doing it. But when I started watching Dalton Kincaid's tape, I hit up my buddy, Fantasy Pros colleague Thor Nystrom, who's a college football savant. He's awesome. And I'm sitting here texting him. I'm like, dude, I'm not crazy here, but help me. I'm watching Dalton Kincaid right now, and all I see is shades of Travis Kelce when I'm watching this dude. And I do not throw this around lightly. So for everybody watching this right now, I don't make these kind of comps lightly. Like, usually people get pissed off at my comps and are like, oh, really? Really? That's easy? But Dalton Kincaid has put up the production over the last 2 years. I mean, he's top 5 in damn near every metric that you can look at, Eric, for collegiate tight ends. So if you're looking at a guy to really toss your chips in as far as a rookie guy who could hit the ground running, Dalton Kincaid's the top guy on my list. He's my TE1. I don't have a problem with Michael Mayer. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go with Michael Mayer in early best ball drafts because of, like you're talking about, some of the athleticism. Like, I think he's got enough athleticism to earn targets and to be okay. Is he a guy that's going to take the roof off and give you this crazy upside? I don't necessarily see that. But what we could see, and the consistent chalk place that he's getting mocked to, is Green Bay. And Green Bay has no pass catchers. Like, outside of Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon catching passes. I mean, they got Romeo Doubs and a bunch of schmoes. It's nobody. So if Michael Mayer falls there and he goes to Green Bay, you could possibly comfortably project 100 targets, 90 targets to him in his rookie season. So I want to see landing spot with him before I dive into that for rookie tight ends. But the guys that I'm really, really targeting right now is Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta. Now, I'll take my shots on Mayer and Dynasty. Let me quantify that a little bit better. I'll take my shots on Mayer and Dynasty rookie drafts. Where I'm talking about holding my hesitation is in early best ball. So, but with Sam Laporta, he's my tight end 3 over Darnell Washington. He's the other guy that I want in both of those formats right now. Like, I'm going to take him in early best ball drafts. I'm going to take him, and his ADP is probably crazy low. Like, I don't have it pulled up right now, Eric, but where do you see Sam Laporta going in early FFPC drafts?
In the Fantasy Pros Championship, I'm sure he is not being drafted at all. No, I take that back. He actually is. Tight end 37 at the 1905. So right at the end.
That's free money, baby. Yep. And because Sam Laporta, when he hits the NFL field, he will ride or die by his ability to catch passes. And he's done this extremely well at Iowa over the last 2 years. And what tells you how good Sam Laporta is he also succeeded playing 20% of his snaps as an outside wide receiver. So not only that, Give me 1 second because I want to pull up his RAS score for the people at home since we're talking about this, Eric. Laporta tested extremely well. Now he weighed in a little small. Sam Laporta's RAS 9.25 for the people at home. That's awesome, man. So I think he's going to make his money as a pass catcher in the NFL. And that's what you want to be looking at if you're going to draft rookies. Yes, a lot of rookie tight ends take a little bit longer. And are they asked to block? Sam Laporta is not going to make his money by blocking. It's going to be by catching passes.
Do you have, just curiously, Michael Mayer's RAS score? Because I feel like it was a little bit different. Like, I thought at the combine it was bad. Like, it was not good. And then all of a sudden I saw stuff on Twitter like, oh, it's actually maybe a little bit better than I thought.
It is a little bit better. It is 8.8.
Because
I don't think it's
right?
Which is good. His vert and his broad jump were not great. I don't think we saw the shuttle in the 3-cone yet when he originally tested. So I think it was lower because of that. Although I'd have to go back. But his 40 was okay. Like 4.7 is at the high range of what I'm willing to consider for tight ends. If Michael Mayer would have ran a 4.8, I would be shoving him off every board. I would not be drafting him. I would tell people to fade him. Basically, that's the coffin nail for tight end production. If you don't run faster than a 4.8 in the 40, you could pretty much just kiss your fantasy production goodbye. Like the guys that have turned out to be fantasy producers, and I know it's just one metric, but seriously, if you go back over the last 10 to 15 years and you look at guys that have produced at the tight end position, if you were to just take this one quantifier and say, okay, did they run a 4.8 or lower? Okay, who went over that? Just lop them off of your list. You're going to narrow the field about guys that you care about by a ton and cut out all the dead weight.
And you know, it's one metric, like you said, but that's not to say one metric can't be highly predictive.
No, it's not to say that one metric can't. Like we're talking about RAS scores here.
Right.
It's not to say you need athleticism at all these positions, especially running back and tight end. Can you get away with like a 4.6 40 as a wide receiver? Yes, you can. But at tight end, you got to be a crazy good athlete to sit here and produce fantasy points. Like, and you see it in every one of these guys. Like, look at the top of the board. Travis Kelce, ridiculous athlete. Mark Andrews, good athlete. George Kittle, ridiculous athlete. It just goes down the board. If you want to chase the high-end ceiling, David Njoku, ridiculous athlete. You need to have the athleticism, or these guys are not going to pay off with that type of ceiling that you're looking for.
I want to talk about receivers here because I know you have a lot of thoughts on these guys. So I'm going to open it up right now.
Okay.
Zay Flowers, why are people sleeping on this guy?
Because they look at his size and they think like the narrative gets thrown around there, which is a terrible narrative that he's a slot-only player, which, first of all, I don't care if he's a slot-only player, which he's not. Okay, if you're out there in the weeds saying that, you're telling on yourself because he's not a slot-only player. He played 65.8% of his snaps in college on the outside. Now, is he going to be asked to do that in the NFL? I'm not saying that he's going to, but can he win on the outside if he's asked to do that? Oh, you better believe it. He's got the size. He bulked up. He weighed in over 180. He ran good. He tested well. He's going to get first-round draft capital, I think, right now, considering that he backed up the proof of concept with his testing metrics. Now, if you look at some of the other deeper stuff, is he going to pop in certain models depending on if you're looking at efficiency? Maybe not. But the other things that we care about, he had a 93rd percentile college dominator, 89th percentile collegiate target share. The thing that gets wonky with some of these metrics is you're also dependent on quarterback play. Again, we've talked to this throughout the entire episode, Eric, of separating quarterback play and wide receiver play. And that's really where it comes down for Zay Flowers of turning on the film. There are so many times on the film for him where he's dusting corners and either it's an errant pass by the quarterback or the quarterback gets sacked, that it's ridiculous, man. It's almost, and it's the same thing, and people will know the parallel because this got talked about with him constantly in last year's draft cycle. It's the same thing when we watched Jahan Dotson last year. Jahan Dotson had to deal with terrible quarterback play at Penn State. The same thing for Zay Flowers happened last year and happened pretty much for his entire career at BC. He had bad quarterback play. And I'm sorry, the wide receivers can't throw the ball up in the air and catch it to themselves. If they could, heck, Zay Flowers would have been better off if that had been the case.
All right. So we know why you love Zay Flowers. These next two guys I want to bring up, one of them you love quite a bit, much more so than the rest of, fantasy Twitter or whatever. And then one you like quite a bit less than fantasy Twitter. Let's go for the good right now. Puka Nacua. This is a guy that is not drawing first round NFL draft capital, right? And a lot of people are sleeping on him, probably myself included. I probably have not given this guy enough attention. But why do I need to give this guy more attention as my rookie draft approaches?
I think that he's not getting enough attention right now. I mean, one, he didn't test amazing. Okay, so that's a knock against him, and I'm not going to sit here and run away from that. But the other part of this is, I talked about it earlier. People don't have a really good finger on as far as a finger on the pulse of draft capital right now. Like, there are so many guys. If you're looking at Dynasty rookie content right now, we're all projecting. And when you get past the top 3-4 wide receivers, the top 3 running backs, the top 3 or 4 tight ends, nobody has a really good idea with this draft class. And that's not to say like nobody's doing their homework. It's that NFL teams are not tipping their hands right now. Like, we don't even have top 30 visits, things like that. So a lot of these other guys that aren't coming from good helmet colleges like the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world and stuff like that are being slept on some, because there's not a lot of people out here with the hype train trying to hype them up or talking about how good they are. And I haven't been on the I'm going to sit here and wear and fly the flag of Puka Nacua all I can, because the metrics scream to me that this dude can play some freaking football, man. Yeah. Over the last 2 years, this is where he's finished in yards per route run, 2nd and 6th. That's against every FBS wide receiver with 50 or more targets. Where he is finished in PFF receiving grade, 2nd and 30th. And he also offers opportunity and versatility, because at BYU, they gave him carries. My comp for Puka Nacua is Dollar Store Deebo Samuel. The guy got 39 carries at BYU and produced 357 rushing yards, running at almost 10 yards per carry. The numbers speak for themselves. And I understand people don't know what draft capital he's going to get. I don't either. And if he goes in the 5th or 6th round, I'm going to have to adjust. Does that mean that I'm going to sit here and wipe him totally off my draft board? No. But where he's going right now, that we don't know draft capital, and I'm just looking at the prospect profile for this player, I love Puka Nacua.
Yeah, Puka Nacua. It's definitely a guy that we need to be paying attention to in our late 2nd, our early 3rd rounds, obviously, of rookie drafts for sure. The last guy I want to get to, and I was talking with a bunch of people on not only this show, but other shows, other high stakes, private conversations I've had with high stakes fantasy football owners. Jalen Hyatt has been ascending in a lot of not only rookie rankings, but in the Fantasy Pros Championship, the Never Too Early Best Ball Championship. This guy has been moving up in drafts. I feel like you have him quite a bit lower than a lot of other people. Why do you not like Jalen Hyatt? And I know he's kind of a polarizing player, Derek.
I don't like Jalen Hyatt because outside of this last year when Cedric Tillman was hurt, Jalen Hyatt's not been good. Like, if you look at other metrics outside of, okay, he had a really, really good season, and okay, he's fast. His breakout age is in the 37th percentile. And why do we care about that? Okay, well, we care about players that are good in college and good early, because what that tells you is they're good football players. They demanded targets at an early age in the programs. Jalen Hyatt didn't do that. Jalen Hyatt didn't even demand targets until Cedric Tillman got hurt this last year. And to put this up for competition, Cedric Tillman is a okay NFL prospect. He is not a slam dunk NFL prospect by any stretch. So you're looking at the competition that he had to face for targets alone, and he couldn't overcome that. And this year, okay, he put up the numbers. Okay, you also have to look at this with context. Jalen Hyatt played from the slot. He got nothing but free releases. Unless he gets those free releases in college, you're looking at a guy that's 6 foot 176. And I went on this long rant about not fading guys for slot players. That is true, but what do we see for Jalen Hyatt? Is he going to be allowed to play the slot? or because he's this speedster, this field stretcher? Is he going to be asked to play a Z role, an X role on the outside from the jump? If that's the case, Jalen Hyatt is going to struggle.
Yeah.
Outside of me not being high on him because of the other parts and pieces of his prospect profile, which screamed to me that he's probably going to be a bust.
Yeah,
he's getting hype. I'm not chasing that hype train.
And I've seen and maybe it's just because of when I'm logging on Twitter or whatever, but I'm seeing a lot of like Ted Ginn comparisons.
Yeah,
with Jalen Hyatt.
I compared him to Anthony Schwartz.
Oh, Anthony Schwartz.
Like, who the heck is that? Anthony Schwartz was a good collegiate producer. Again, played out of the slot, a lot of gimmicky stuff, was fast as all get out. What's he doing in the NFL? Nada.
I can't. One of my dynasty leagues on my taxi squad, and I don't have him there anymore. But for years, it was Anthony Schwartz and Tutu Atwell were my two and they're just whatever. We'll see with Atwell, but I'm kind of giving up the ghost on him. Hey, for anybody watching, all you Better fans out there, pay attention. You can have the Better Sports Network newsletter emailed to you every day. The only place to get our daily Better Bet Plus exclusive offers, program alerts, special events, and top moments. Registered for free right now at bettersports.com. We want to continue this dynasty conversation. We're going to talk about Trey Lance. We're going to talk about Brock Purdy. We're going to talk about I want to talk a little bit about what you talked about earlier in the first segment about a guy, Derek, in Joe Mixon, that you said you should have been trading him last year. I want to get your thoughts on who might someone that goes running back speed this year as well. We have about 20 minutes left in the show. It's Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros, Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. We're going to jam-pack a ton of content in this last 20 minutes here on the Better Sports Network.
Talk sports with Lisa Ann and Rick Kamla, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Better Sports Network.
Let me say something about Tiger. You know, Tiger has had to redesign his entire swing. Tiger has a difference in the length of his legs because of that horrible accident. You know, in golf, there's no like, hey, you can't walk the greens, you have to take a cart. So I assumed by day 3 on Sunday, you know, the inflammation would start. He took a couple breaks where they take care of his back a little bit, but it is fascinating watching him. So it gave me this thought, like, is he that skilled at golf? Or is this a mental thing of dedication and determination? He is so dedicated to the sport that no matter what, he's relentless to it. And the dedication and determination goes to the golf, the swing, the playing, the walking, but it goes to his overall health. The average person who doesn't stay in great shape, gets in an accident like that, goes through multiple surgeries, is not recovering and going out there to walk. And that course has some pretty steep inclines, a lot of walking. I mean, how else can you factor these athletes, you know, the Michael Jordans, the LeBrons, these players that just, their whole focus is really optimal health, optimal body skills, optimal. And then what comes next is being the best at what they do.
I think you just hit on why Tiger still has that drive. I don't know this. I don't know the man. It could just be love of the game. It could be, I want to make as much money as I can while playing. Could be all this stuff. But LA, a lot of people think Tiger Woods is the GOAT of golf. And I don't understand how you can be the GOAT of golf when you are 3 majors short of Jack Nicklaus. Okay? So, like, LeBron, I don't think he cares what guys like me say anymore, right? He's past Kareem. He thinks he's the GOAT. I mean, he's 3rd on my list. He's in the debate. Many other people think he's the GOAT. He's not my GOAT. You know what I mean? So I wonder if Tiger is there, like LeBron, like, I don't care what the pundits, what the barbershops say. I'm the GOAT. I don't have to do anything more. This is all gravy. I wonder if Tiger looks at it that way.
I don't know what Tiger's mindset is in the GOAT status, but when players talk about what it's like to be at a tournament, when Tiger's playing versus when he's not, they'll tell you that they're on the greens and they can hear the roar 4 holes over, and that there is nothing that compares to the excitement of when he's present.
Better Sports Live, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, exclusively on Better Sports Network. Or listen whenever you want on the app with BSN On Demand.
The Better Sports Network is live here with the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. About 17 minutes left in the show. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros. Remember that you can adopt the Dynasty Orphan today at myffpc.com. Reduced price teams available ranging from $77 all the way up to $2,500. Just go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com. 49ers quarterbacks, Derek, based on what we've heard from John Lynch this past week and Kyle Shanahan, certainly seems that Brock Purdy is the starter when he's healthy. So number one, what do you do with him, let's say in super flex drafts? And then the second part of this, if you invested in Trey Lance in your rookie draft a couple years ago, what do you do with him in dynasty leagues right now as well?
Well, Purdy, you're going to be holding him right now because nobody's going to be trading for him probably, or like they trade for him at a discount. So you're just trying to shy away all these low ball offers that you're going to get in your inbox right now. So I would hold Purdy. If you're looking to deal him, you wait until he's healthy, makes a start or two, proves the concept that he's healthy, and then bye-bye, Brock Purdy. For Trey Lance, I'm trading for him wherever I possibly can right now. And I'm doing this because for everybody that thinks that Trey Lance is a bust, we have not seen enough out of Trey Lance to know what he is. But what I can tell you is Trey Lance has rushing ability. We've seen that. And if he ends up as a passer, like if he starts all these games, Eric, and he rushes and what we think, the fact of it is if he's a starter, his floor is probably QB 12, QB 15, just based off of his rushing equity alone. He'll be a top 12 quarterback.
Which, by the way, in redraft, that's roughly where he was drafted last year, too.
Yes. But he's not being drafted there right now,
right?
Because nobody knows. And my whole thing about it, like, I think he is a fantastic value because you're going to trade for him for less than he's worth if he hits his upside. Heck, the other thing about this, the draft capital that was thrown into Trey Lance, he's going to get other opportunities to start. He will get opportunities to start, even if it's not in San Francisco. Somebody will take that swing. And for everybody that's like, oh, I don't know about all that. Okay, Marcus Mariota got a second shot, although he looked terrible for multiple years. Same thing with Sam Darnold. It happens. Teddy Bridgewater got another chance to start. These things happen. The draft capital hangs with these guys. So I'm trading for Trey Lance where I can. I'm trying to sit here and get him for like late 23 firsts, which, I mean, honestly, if he was healthy and stuff, or if he hits his upside, is a ridiculous steal.
Let me ask you this dynasty philosophy question here. How do you value 2024 picks right now? Because obviously 2023 picks, this is when you can get the most for them, right? But what about 2024 picks, trading them or trading for them right now, Derek?
I'm trying to get all of them that I can. I mean, if you're at a spot.
Now, I'm going to stop you right there. Right there. Is that because of the 2024 draft being perceived as a stronger draft than 2023? Or is it because of the time of the year we're at?
Time of the year. It's absolutely time of the year. Like, I have no clue. I don't dive into prospects until after the NFL season is over. So I won't start looking at the 2024 class until after this upcoming NFL season is over. So this is just based off of a dynasty strategy. Right now, 2024 picks are not being like immensely hyped like the 23 picks were. 23 picks were like gold. People wouldn't give them up for anything. And wow, look at this. The 23 class is here. And now everybody's like, I don't know how I feel about this class.
Every year
it happens, man. And right now you can go out and get 24 picks. And where I think that I'm trying to trade for all these 24 firsts. One of the best spots to do that is in your rookie draft. You know, if you don't like where you're at, probably the case of it is somebody might want a player, and so you just trade him. Even if you're going to change that equity into a 24 pick, give up a mid 24 first. I'm in a 23 first. Get a 24 first and a 24 second. It's an equity gain. You know, even if it's a late first and you don't know where the heck it's going to end up at, it's still an equity gain off of just holding the 23 first, especially if you don't like who's on the board right then. So if you can make that move right now, then do it. If you're not loving this draft class, like a lot of people aren't, trade out of it. Trade out of it and get 24 firsts. I mean, this type of thing fits regardless of whatever kind of dynamic your team is in, whether you're competing or you're rebuilding, you could still go get 24 firsts. Do it now.
What about 2023? Let's say you own the 101, which obviously, let's talk about non-super flex here. Non-Superflex, the 101, unequivocally, overwhelmingly is Bijan Robinson right now. What kind of a king's ransom would you want in return if you were going to trade the 101 to somebody?
I need at least, like, if I'm going to give it up for, I'll give a few different scenarios here real quick. If I'm trading it for straight up picks, I need like probably 2 top 5, 2 top 6 picks in this year's class to move the 101, probably 2 top 5 picks. If I'm or at least 2 firsts, like a 23 first, like that has to be top 5, a 24 first, and maybe something else. Or I need 2 proven players, like a top 20, 2 top 20 wide receivers, a top 15 wide receiver, and a pick, things of that nature. Like, I either want a haul or really high valued assets, like probably 2 of them as far as picks go, or I want a really good proven asset and some juice on top of that, depending on what that kind of looks like.
So what if somebody offered you the 104? No, let me take that back. What if somebody offered you the 103, the 105, and Deebo Samuel? Is that enough for you to give up the 101?
I think in that, not necessarily for Deebo, but a player in that kind of ilk.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be enough. I mean, depending on how your team build and stuff, because you're really talking about, okay, I can get another quarterback. I can get in Superflex, you can get a quarterback with the 3rd pick. The 5th pick, you might be able to get another quarterback, or you're looking at like JSN, and you're getting another top. I mean, Deebo's a wide receiver 2 type, 3 type of player. If you flip him, you're getting maybe another first in the process. So you're really looking at like you're getting 3 firsts for the 101. I think it's a totally acceptable return.
All right. So one of the things that I like about you on Twitter and, listening to you, you hold yourself accountable for your calls over the years, which I really appreciate, because there's not a lot of fantasy analysts that do that. You had, looking back, Jalen Reagor is your number 1 receiver in, I think, the 2020 draft, right? 2020.
Yep, sure did.
And you said, well, okay, we all have to take our L's. Nobody gets this right 100% of the time. But you also said that you have changed your process of talent evaluation since then. Can you let us know a little bit what you were doing back then and what you're doing now to refine and really improve the process?
So I think there's a lot of different things. One, I've kind of gone deeper into the analytics about trying to break down these players' games. A lot of that has been just getting better at being an analyst, and a lot of it is also like access to different data, really like what I cultivate or look at as being good data points to look at prospects. So I think that not only on the data side have I become a better analyst in that sense, but also from a film aspect. I think with film, I've gotten a lot better watching it, and I still want to improve. Like, for me, if you're not continuing to try to push it forward, Eric, and learn and grow and stuff, then you're dying, man. You're dying, and you're going to get passed by. You got to keep pushing the envelope. The point where you start thinking, I know it all, is the point where you're just full of shit. Okay. So I'm not going to do that. Like right now, I'm signed up. I'm going to be doing the Scouting Academy stuff to learn how to actually watch film and get certified like scouts do. That matters to me because I want to keep continuing to up my game. So that's really where I think the process has gone and where it's going to go.
And this is like, again, not trying to put words in your mouth. This is an annual process for you, right? Like, you can do the best you can in 2022, but that's not good enough for 2023. You can do the best that you possibly can, knowing what you know in 2023, but you're going to know so much more for 2024 because you're constantly, just like the NFL. You mentioned it, second movie quote of the night. Adapt or die. Moneyball. Brad Pitt. Billy Beane. You have to adapt or die. And I think you're evolving and adapting here too.
You have to, man. And like whether that's getting better with data, getting better handling data sets, doing R coding, looking at different analytics, or get like what I'm trying to do, because I think that there is a huge component to evaluating prospects by marrying both the data and the film. I mean, I talked about Zay Flowers. If you looked at some of the data, you'd probably hate him. And it's the same thing with Christian Watson last year. Everybody said about Christian Watson last year, and they were like, oh, he's coming from a small school. He's raw. He's this. He's that. I was massive on Christian Watson last year because I was like, I went to Senior Bowl. I saw this dude freaking dominate. And when you look at different data points, just besides the fact that he came from a small school, he was a baller.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly trying to refine the process because, and I'm not scared to sit here and step out and say, okay, the echo chamber and the consensus is saying this, but my process says this. I don't give a shit, man. Like, I'm going to follow my process, and if my process is wrong, it's a learning opportunity to get better for next year.
One of the things that you brought up in the very first segment tonight was you were screaming at people who would listen. You need to trade Joe Mixon now. You need to get rid of this guy. And I think one of the trickiest parts of Dynasty Fantasy Football, whether you're in a home league, office league, or a high stakes league, whatever it is, and this is something I struggle with. One of the trickiest things in Dynasty Fantasy Football is knowing when to cash out on your running backs, right? Knowing when, okay, this is the maximum I'm going to get for this player right now. I've exhausted his use on this team. I need to get younger. I need to get different, I need to get an exchange in for him right now. You said Joe Mixon last year. Who are some of the running backs that you would be looking at trying to cash out on right now this year, Derek, that can, is really the last chance you have to cash in on these veteran guys?
So I'm going to bring up his name, and not a lot of people, nobody's talking about trying to get rid of him right now. Nick Chubb. You need to be trading away Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is going to be 28 this year, next year. And I go into these contracts because it matters, man. Not a lot of people, and I still think contract stuff and understanding those is a great, great value for dynasty players. Mm-hmm. Next year for his contract, he's not a free agent. The Browns could cut him and save $12 million, and he's going to be 29 years old. You need to get rid of Nick Chubb this year immediately. You just have to.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because, and so I'm in a dynasty, private dynasty fantasy football league with a bunch of people, including FFPC co-founder.
I feel like I'm about to get a trade question.
You are. You're gonna get one of them. Now there's.
I was like, I'm tingling. I feel like it's coming, Eric.
Now, like Dave the Dizzle Gerzak, the co-founder of the FFPC. I'm in a couple of leagues with him, but I'm going to bring this one up with you. And I'm not going to bring up the other trade, but let me ask you this. I have Rachaad White in this league. I have a really good team in this league.
Okay.
He is offering me Nick Chubb and the 210 this year. I have to give up Rachaad White and the 206 this year. You're telling me probably decline that trade because you'd rather have Rachaad White over Nick Chubb at a minimum, right?
Actually, I'm going to tell you to smash accept that trade.
Really? Why is that?
Yes.
After you get done ripping Nick Chubb.
No, right after I got done ripping Nick Chubb, it's because I don't have any belief in Rachaad White.
Oh, okay.
If you look at efficiency metrics on Rachaad White last year, for most of the season, he was one of the most inefficient runners in the NFL. Now, he got better towards the back half of the season, but still, we're looking at him. And you talked about breakaway run rate and stuff earlier, Eric. This is Rachaad White's metrics from last season. He was 48th in yards per touch, 31st in yards created, 35th in yards created per touch. Any of these sound good yet? No, not really. 44th in breakaway run rate. He's not nearly as good as people think. Do not trade for Rachaad White. I've traded him away. I had him on a few teams. I've traded him away off of every roster.
At Dbro_FFB. Check him out at fantasypros.com. Derek, thank you so much. This was tremendous, man. We could have gone on for another couple hours tonight.
Another hour.
Yeah, we will have you on again. Thank you, my friend, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, buddy.
MyFFPC.com, your home for not only the Fantasy Pros Championship, where you can win $1 million, but the never too early drafts as well. JJ Zachariason will be my guest next week on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Be good. Dynasty Nerds with Garrett Price is up next. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We appreciate it.